I can't think of anything I've ever been awarded that's meant this much to me. Ironically, I probably, if I were real honest, have to thank asthma and a car wreck for me being here tonight. You see, I was born in Corpus Christi, Texas, as a very asthmatic young child, and so at the age of 2, the doctors told my parents that they had to get me out of the humidity and into a drier climate, or I was going to be in deep trouble. And so my dad worked for the railroad, and he transferred to Brownwood, Texas. So I'm grateful for the asthma. And then in 1961, when I was just getting into radio, and by the way, I was so talented in 1961 that I actually got a job in radio, and they would not let me speak because I sounded horrible. And if you think it's bad now, you can't imagine. Well, I suffered a car wreck in 1961. I kind of went out a windshield, and I took the steering wheel with me, and got some brain damage, which is still affecting our marriage. But no, but I did. I hit my voice box on the steering wheel and did some damage, and I literally went close to 6 weeks without being able to talk. All I could do was whisper. I mean, I really had no voice. And when the voice started coming back, it came back like this. So, I mean, that's it. I just started talking funny, and maybe it was because I was protecting the voice box or something, but that's why I sound like I do. I need to thank Catherine Wood. Coach Wood told me many, many times, he said, "Dallas, I don't give a flip who broadcasts our games, but my wife loves you." And so, thank you, Catherine. The other nominees, Bill Stovall was just a special man in my life, a mentor, a dear friend. I must tell you how proud he was of Mitch. And he was so anxious for him to get to the varsity. And Mitch, I'll tell you that once the ball game started, Bill was all business. He never spoke to me, even during timeouts or anything. And when you made the varsity and started your first ball game, I got about halfway through the broadcast, and in a commercial break, Bill punched me. And I took the headset off, and he said, "You don't say much about offensive linemen, do you?" Well, I started mentioning offensive linemen right after that. And guess who was the first one I would mention? Kobe Freeman was like family to me. I'm going to tell you what, we not only were bad when W.T. Stapler and Steve Freeman came here, we were lousy. I mean, we were real bad. And they took a freshman quarterback and built a bridge to the future on his back. And I'm going to tell you what, you'll never know what a beating that young man took as a freshman. But we did the beating the 3 years after that. Eddie Gill's a great offensive lineman. I like, it doesn't matter. Said basketball player also, and people don't believe that. No. Hey, I tell you, Eddie was a terrific football player here at Brownwood High, 2 very good teams. And but I tell you, when I see Eddie and I think about Eddie, I think of his dad. such a great man, and I loved his dad and had such great times with him. And his mom is still one of my favorite people, just precious. But Eddie was just, he was an outstanding football player, and he was a captain for a reason. Roy Spence, what can I say about Roy? He's got a real good hot sauce. And that's about it. You know, Roy was a terrific football player, a great defensive back on what was, what is the best high school defensive team that I've ever seen. They were a good football team overall, even a great football team overall. Went 14-0, but the defense was absolutely remarkable. I've never seen a high school defense as good as that one was in '65. They went 14-0 and gave up 40-something points on the season. They weren't scored upon until the 7th ball game of the year. They were absolutely terrific. The three most important men in my life are Jesus Christ, my dad, and a man named Ken Schultz. If you don't know Jesus Christ, I'd be happy to visit with you about him. My dad was a great athlete. And I know he dreamed of having a son who was a great athlete. But it became apparent very, very early on that I wasn't going to be one. And so he made me a sports fan. In the spring, he'd take me to LaGray Field in Fort Worth, and I watched exhibition baseball games, and he'd take me to basketball games. But more than anything, he took me to football games. And on Saturday afternoon, and these young people in here don't comprehend this because it's 24-hour sports now. But back when I was a kid growing up, they only had one college football game per weekend on the radio, and it was called the Humboldt Southwest Conference Game of the Week with Kern Tibbs. And I grew to idolize Kern Tibbs. My dad had that radio on, and I grew to love play-by-play and love Kern Tibbs. And it was my dad who made me want to become a sportscaster. And to be honest with you, I never thought I'd get an opportunity. But in 1963, they decided to change horses and bring in new personnel to broadcast the Brownwood Lions. And they named a man named Ken Schultz to be the head of the broadcast crew. In other words, the voice of the Lions. And Ken Schultz knew my heart, knew my desire, and even though nobody else believed in me and nobody else trusted me, Ken went to the hierarchy and he said, I want Dallas to do the games with me. And he took a chance. And I will never forget him for that. Ken Schultz has never received the accolades he deserves. People talk about me being in my 50th year and that, I've been, the voice of the Lions for 50 years since 1963. Ken Schultz was the voice of the Lions from 1963 to 1975. All I did was help him and do some games on occasion, but he was the boss. And he did a great job, and he's a dear friend of mine. And my friend Ken is suffering greatly right now with cancer. And I wish you'd pray for him. There's so many others. Morris and Lorraine Southall are so very special to me. Some of the great memories I had in my life of working with Morris in the radio booth. Bob and the coaches at Brownwood High School right now. The administrators, obviously all the players, radio stations that have put up with me, and KOXE more than any others. I appreciate them, their staff, their personnel so very much. A man named Fred Perry is here tonight, and I went to a basketball game with J. Fred back in about 1961. I'd never done play-by-play in my life, and we were in Weatherford, I think. Fred will correct me, but anyway, I was sitting there beside him just watching what he did and everything, and he broadcast the first half, and then, they sent it back to the radio station for a few minutes of music before the second half, and Fred got up and he said, "I'm going to go to the bathroom and get me something to drink." He said, if they start before I get back, take off. It's yours." And sure enough, he didn't come back. And so I was shaking like a leaf and scared to death, but I struggled as best I could to get through this. So Fred really was the first one who threw me in the water. And Don Newberry has been a long-time friend, and I can't tell you what Don means to me. There were times before I met Jesus Christ where my life almost ran off the tracks. And this man, Don Newberry, is one of the ones who held out his hand. He was always there for me. I'm so blessed to have the family that I have. My brother and sister are both here tonight. I have kids here. I have grandkids here. I have a very special niece here. And I have the woman well, I wouldn't be here tonight without her. I can't put into words what Linda means